Before we are joined by our guest or guests today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to their generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million to COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce actor Jessie Buckley of The Lost Daughter. So I guess the first thing that I thought maybe we could talk about, because it's such a big aspect of your part in the movie, is working with children. Because, you know, it's a very difficult thing to do, I think, and it's often unsuccessful. But I thought the children were so remarkable. The children who are playing your children in the movie are so remarkable. And I think that's attributable to you, having worked with children before in movies. I think that so much of it is dependent on the person that they're interacting with. So I wanted to ask you about that experience and what it was that you did to be able to elicit those performances.
I think children get a bad rep. I love working with children because I think they're just like honest, and when they're bored, and there's no point, you know, you can't manipulate them basically, and you know, you just have to be with them. And these girls were amazing. One of them had acted before and one of them hadn't. And I don't know, we just kind of, like I do, I guess with adults, is you just try and get to know each other and and see what parts of them are in the story. And I don't know, it felt kind of, I mean, there's always a moment when you first meet each other, even as adults, where everybody's a bit shy, aren't there? And you end up kind of, there's a moment where you have to get to know each other, where it is a stranger, and they're trying to figure you out as much as you're trying to kind of figure them out and be comfortable with each other. But Maggie was also like really good at kind of, it was always clear when we were when it was action, but also she'd often just roll the camera when they weren't aware of, to get just stuff of them just being who they were. And then the Robin, the older girl who had acted, she was so fantastic and like a really kind of an old soul. And I think she just was smart, you know, she just caught on quite quickly what was required of us all, but in a way that it still felt like human and not kind of like weird kind of, I don't know if I've answered that question. No.
Yeah, I think you have. I just remember when I shot Synecdoche, New York, Catherine Keener played the mother of the very young girl who was like 4.5 at the time. And I owe such a debt to her because I mean, she was the person who brought that relationship with that girl to life. I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't do it. But because she was able to sort of engage with that girl in a certain way, I think that the performance was able to sort of be there. And so I was curious about that, as you know, as far as your interaction.
You know, they're young children and they just want to play, you know, in their way. And that's why kids are brilliant. if you give them a situation where they can play, they're amazing. And in a way, you have to kind of come down on their level and not try and be. They know when you're bullshitting, like they know when you're kind of not really being alive as a person. So I think, and sometimes that was tricky. Sometimes one of them would kind of get bored. And so you'd have to bring them back into the room in some way or find a way to kind of make that moment alive again. But
I think that, I think so. So in a sense, I think one of the things that I'm taking from this is that in a way, their performance affects your performance or creates a necessity in you to be present, which is which is something that I kind of like remember from the movie that we did, was your presence in all moments with the other actors, and how you rolled with the punches. I think it,
I also don't like, I think there's always opportunity, even if they are bored, then great. Like, let's see, instead of having a fixed idea of what you think this scene is going to be. And sometimes, sometimes you have to go to a place which feels really uncomfortable and go, it wasn't what I thought it was. And you have to kind of work through that. And then always something more interesting and alive and real comes out from that. So, and kids, to be honest, they're the toughest crowd, but they're the most honest crowd with that, because you have no option but to let go of your preconceptions all the time, or your things that you might have kind of gone, this is what this scene is about, because really there's just a little girl standing in front of you, looking up at you, waiting for you to make something up, because that's what they're living. They're living a life where they're making something up all the time, and they're like soaking things in, and so I don't mind the uncomfortable bit of it, I guess. I think they are the interesting bits of it. And I also think they're the interesting bits of that relationship, is it was a young woman and a woman at a certain point of their life trying to figure each other out. And both of those girls offered something that was there in the story anyway, about what are the lessons that we have adopted through time to pass on to each other, and what's the truth that's actually happening between these two women at certain ages of their life.
The two women being the two versions.
Like a mother and daughter,
Right. Okay.
We've all been in that position. Well, we've been in the daughter position or the son position of that. Really?
Well, I was thinking also, it sort of brings me to the two versions of this character, the version that you play and the version that Olivia Colman plays. And I don't know, it might be one of the things I was struck by, and I've seen movies before where, there's a person and then there's a flashback to another person, another version of the person, or earlier version of the person. And one of the things that struck me about this as I was watching it was that, there's always a distance. There's always a lack of ability to get from one to the other. You know what I mean? And I felt it in this movie. Maybe it didn't feel like a flashback, for example. Your character. It felt like this is the same person at two different periods of time, and they cannot communicate with each other. It's unbridgeable, which I found very moving, and frustrating in a good way. And so I was curious about whether or not you and Olivia Colman worked together at all during the process, or whether you were completely separated. I don't mean work together in a scene together, but I mean, did you did you hang out? Did you figure out characteristics and things that?
No, we did. No, the only thing we did was decide on an accent, and that was it. And actually, that was also Maggie, because Maggie didn't really feel, she didn't feel it was necessary. And I think, really Leda as a character, somebody well, I don't know, for me, she's somebody who was searching, she was a lifer, she wanted life. And to try and reduce it to be a mimicry of two people at different points in their life or different chapters of their life would have been a disservice to the character. And anyway, I think Olivia, maybe at one point, because I shot my stuff first, maybe I think she thought that, oh, maybe I will watch some of Jessie's just to see that we're on the same page. And I think she started to watch, and then she thought, no, I can't. I don't, I don't want to. But I mean, we change all the time. Like, who I was when I was 15 is different to who I am now, or what I feel about things now. And I think that's much more interesting than trying to play kind of a mime artistry or mimicry in some way, because I couldn't have experienced what Olivia was experiencing at that point of the life of the character from where I was.
Right.
Yeah, so really it was just an accent.
And you were all in Greece together?
We overlapped by a few days, and we did hang. Yeah, when I know Olivia a little bit from here, from home. So we hung out, and we had dinner and wine and sing songs, and but by the time she got to shoot, I had finished and had gone back home. So yeah.
And how was it working during COVID in Greece?
We had to quarantine for 2 weeks at the beginning. But the place that we ended up in Greece because of COVID, I think initially Maggie had imagined that it would be in some kind of, seaside place off New York, kind of. But then COVID hit and that was not possible. And then I think she wanted to try Nova Scotia, but Nova Scotia wouldn't have us as a, fair enough. And then this island in Greece had no COVID cases at all. And through the amazing producers, Talia and Osnat, somehow we ended up there. And it was amazing. I mean, it was kind of like, it felt like being a little theatre troupe, we were all in this tiny little island where just fishermen lived. And we were for myself, we were using this disused school on the edge of the water. And so you could walk in 5 minutes there. There's no hoo-ha. I could go and have a swim in the morning and then shoot. And then we'd all jump into the sea afterwards and have a swim and, test and wear masks and stuff where needed. But because it was kind of a safe place, it gave us a certain kind of freedom in the middle of a storm, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to ask you about acting in film, in contrast to doing theater. I know that you've been doing both, kind of in the midst of COVID. Really, you've been in plays and you've been in films, and you're currently, I guess it's closed now, but you for this until after the new year. But you're in Cabaret and in London, and I'm wondering if there's any distinction in how you work in theater and how you work in film.
I don't think I work differently, and I think I'm looking for the same thing in trying to, in the same way that you with people, like they're always strangers that you meet on a page that you try and get to know, and they try to get to know you. And really, I want to get to a place where it feels like it's not even a conscious thing. It's just something that happens for like 2 hours in a night on stage or over kind of. But the feeling of what happens in those moments is different, I guess. Like, I haven't done theatre for a few years now. And I was really nervous to do it, and for lots of reasons, because I think I felt like, oh my God, there's going to be an energy being received and giving that has not been had by all of us for like the last 2 years because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And also I haven't been in that place for a while. And I got on the first night, I got such a shock. I actually fell off the stage, which was the worst and best thing that can happen to me, because there is nothing worse that can happen to you apart from falling off the stage. But I genuinely got such a shock.
How much of a drop was it? How far did you fall?
I mean, far enough that it was not anywhere near the stage. It's in the round, so right. I kind of was meant to get up on this pole, but somehow in my first number, the pole kind of evaporated in my hands, and I just did a complete 360 around the pole and fell off the side of the stage. Anyway, that was a good experience and terrifying. But no, I got.
Did you incorporate it into the? Did you acknowledge it?
Well, it was kind of. I mean, no, you don't. I mean, falling is a really strange experience because you're just looking at everybody else's face, looking at you, going, and you're like, "What's happening right now?" And then you kind of just, your body goes into shock. You just kind of get up and keep going. And I, kept going. And but like Sally gets fired in the next scene, and in my head it was like, of course she gets fired. Like, but I think I got such a shock of like that adrenaline rush in some way. And, stuff happens and it's live, and stuff happens all the time on set too. Like a snow machine doesn't work, or, it just doesn't feel the way you imagined it or whatever. And that's all part of it. Like the real, I know I laugh, but actually it does wake you up and go, I'm human, this is a human thing. It's not, those things are sometimes blessings in disguise. But so, I going back to theatre again, I think the biggest difference is the immediacy of energy that you feel from an audience compared to, I guess, how you, when you're when you're filming, you don't have that external experience as much until you get into cinema and watch it with people, I guess. And it's not really until the show ends that you really hear it, I think it's the beginning and the end that I hear it the most in the theatre. Like my favorite moment in a cinema and in a theatre is that silence just before it starts. And sometimes an audience in a theatre does that collectively without any, they have a sense, there's no music or anything. Sometimes just like half a second where a whole beehive goes quiet. And I always find that like amazing. Like, how do you know that something's about to start in a way? And that same little beat after it ends. And with cabaret at the moment, I feel like I get on a train and I get off and I don't really know what's happened. Kind of, you can feel a temperature of an audience in a way, but until it really ends, you don't really know. It's a very strange thing. It's a very strange world. Is there a moment of panic before it starts for you? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And how long does that take to dissipate?
Well, it's there until you kind of come above the water a little bit and you are just, there's no turning back really.
Right.
You can't go back down. You can't go off. You have to just
get through it.
Get through it. It sounds like the kind of Goldilocks or something.
Yeah.
And I get that with filming. I guess it is a scary thing. And it is scary if you really love something, you know. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, you never know what's going to happen.
Why is it scary if you love it?
Well, because I guess you have you're emotionally invested in it. Like you want people to be in love as much as you are, or not be in love, but at least be affected as much as you've been affected. I don't need everybody to love the thing that I've been doing or watching, but I do want to affect somebody in some way and to get whatever they need to get out of it. I don't want somebody to be asleep.
Are there two parts of your brain working then when you're acting? One that's trying to sort of inhabit and one that's trying to sort of observe reaction?
Observe an audience.
Yeah, reaction. Like, are they bored? Is it working? Is it on? Is it off?
I mean, sometimes I think that's probably more to do with you than to do with them, because I guess you can't expect or predict anybody's. Usually, sometimes when I think I've had a really crap show, I'll get a message from the director being like, that was brilliant. What did you do? And I'm like, oh, what? Really? Like, I felt kind of odd, you know, and I guess it's not really anything to do with you, what other people are experiencing. And if you do go too far down that hole, good riddance, and sometimes you do, and it's horrible. Like, you come home and you go, I hate myself. You know, that wasn't what, but I guess when you're with a live audience, and especially with this version of the show, and I guess with cinema as well, when you're with, you can, there's sometimes a sense, or like with cabaret, you can actually see people's faces. And sometimes that's a joy. Like, if you feel like, somebody's just coming to the theatre to say they're just coming to the theatre, and you're doing a piece which is about fascism in the Weimar Republic, which is, you know, not too far away from what's happening today. Sometimes I go, I use it, like I bring it in and it becomes part of Sally's story, or becomes part of whatever world I'm going into.
Well, Sally is also performing, right? And so the audience is the audience in a sense, right? When she's doing a piece on stage, she would be aware of the audience in those moments, right?
Yeah, and some of those moments, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes. So it's interesting then to think about, like, if that's the case, and to liken it to performing with the young girls in the movie, in that they're, you know, if they're bored, your obligation is to figure out how to connect with them, so that they're not bored.
Yeah. And that's what I quite like. Why I quite enjoy where it's honest, you know, there's not necessarily a technique to kind of hoodwink you in, and it becomes a really real thing. And if they are bored, then that's just what's there that day. I mean, they weren't bored the whole time we were filming. We had a great time. Like, they were really, especially like Robin, the older girl, was really incredible. And she began to understand a way of like inviting in Ellie, who was younger, who hadn't acted before, into the scene, you know, and that was really amazing to see too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How did she do that?
She'd improvise. Like, she would just kind of start talking and be like, she'd just start improvising. And we did lots of kind of that, you know, where the scene where they come in dressing up and stuff, you know, and playing games, and the guy who plays my husband and me are laughing. You know, Maggie set that scene up, and they were genuinely doing that and getting such a thrill out of making us laugh and kind of, yeah.
Well, we're out of time, Jessie. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope this was okay for you. And thanks.
Love you.